Imagine you are standing on the surface of the Earth, and you look up, and the sun is gone. Not set. Not eclipsed. Gone. In its place hangs something black. Something that swallows light instead of giving it. No warmth touches your skin. No shadows fall the way they should. And in that first frozen second, you realize something terrifying. The object hanging in our sky right now, the sun that has fed every living thing that has ever existed, has just become the most lethal object in the solar system. This isn't science fiction. This is physics. And what happens next would unfold in stages so violent, so absolute, that nothing alive would survive to see the end of it. Right now, the sun looks peaceful. It rises every morning in soft gold. It warms your face. It grows your food. It gives Earth the energy that makes life possible. Ancient civilizations worshipped it as a god because it felt eternal. Generous. Alive. But something is wrong with that picture. The sun is not gentle. It is a 1.4 million kilometer wide nuclear furnace, holding back its own gravity through raw thermonuclear force every single second. From 150 million kilometers away, it looks calm. But up close, it is chaos. And if that balance ever flipped, if the fire inside the sun ever lost its battle against gravity, the same object that gives you life could become the object that erases it. Here's the terrifying part. For the sun to become a black hole, it would need to collapse under its own gravity into an incredibly compact object. Real stars can do this when they run out of fuel and their cores can no longer resist gravity's crushing force. But our sun isn't massive enough. It doesn't have the mass required to naturally become a black hole. So let's imagine that it happens anyway. Not through normal stellar evolution. Not through decay. But through some impossible cosmic accident that instantly converts the sun's entire mass into a black hole only about 6 kilometers across. And the moment this happens, there's something you need to understand. Nothing about Earth's orbit changes. That might sound like relief. It isn't. Mass is mass. Gravity doesn't care whether that mass comes from a glowing star, or a collapsed point of darkness. From Earth's perspective, the gravitational pull would remain essentially the same. We wouldn't suddenly get sucked toward the black hole. We wouldn't spiral inward. Earth would continue orbiting the object at roughly the same distance, following almost the same path it follows today. One orbit. 1 year. 365 days. Everything would appear normal. For a few terrifying minutes. Because there's something else traveling between the sun and Earth. Light. And light needs about 8 minutes to cross the 150 million kilometers separating us from the sun. Which means that when the impossible happens, you wouldn't know immediately. For 8 minutes. Earth would continue living as if nothing had changed. For 8 full minutes, the sky would still look normal. People would be walking to work. Children would be playing outside. Birds would still be flying. You would feel the warmth of sunlight on your skin, completely unaware that the sun itself had already disappeared. Then, the last photons would arrive. And suddenly, across the entire planet, the sun would vanish. Not gradually. Not like sunset. One moment, daylight. The next, nothing. Total darkness. Not nighttime darkness. Deep space darkness. The kind of darkness where the stars suddenly become visible everywhere, and the familiar blue sky disappears completely. For a moment, billions of people would simply look upward, trying to understand what they were seeing. Then the temperature would begin to fall. The Earth is no longer receiving the enormous amount of energy that has powered its climate for billions of years. Within days, the consequences would become impossible to ignore. Within roughly a week, temperatures across much of the planet could fall below freezing. And this would only be the beginning. The oceans would begin freezing from the surface downward. Not overnight. Not all at once. But slowly. Relentlessly. Like a tightening fist around every drop of water on Earth. The surface would turn into an enormous frozen landscape. Clouds would change. Weather patterns would collapse. And the world humans have always known would begin disappearing beneath ice. But the cold wouldn't be the first thing to destroy civilization. Something much more fundamental would fail. Food. Because the moment sunlight disappears, photosynthesis stops. And when photosynthesis stops, the foundation of Earth's entire food chain begins to collapse. Every plant on Earth depends, directly or indirectly, on sunlight. Forests. Crops. Grasslands. Even microscopic algae floating through the oceans. The moment the light disappears, their energy source is gone. Plants don't simply stop growing. They begin dying. And that creates a chain reaction unlike anything humanity has ever experienced. First, herbivores lose their food. Then the predators that depend on those herbivores begin starving. And eventually, the collapse reaches us. Humanity sits at the top of an enormous biological pyramid. But remove the foundation, and the entire structure begins falling. Stored food might keep some people alive for a short time. Governments could ration supplies. Cities could lock down. Underground facilities could protect small populations from the freezing surface. But none of that solves the real problem. 8 billion people cannot survive indefinitely without a functioning food system. Agriculture on the scale civilization requires depends on sunlight. Without it, farms become useless. And eventually, warehouses become empty. Then the oceans begin changing too. The surface freezes first, creating a layer of ice between the atmosphere and the liquid water below. But the deeper oceans would remain liquid for much longer because Earth's interior still contains enormous amounts of geothermal energy. That means something strange could happen. Life might not disappear completely. Deep beneath the frozen surface, around geothermal environments, some organisms could survive. Tiny ecosystems could continue existing in darkness. But humanity would face a different reality. We would be trapped on the surface of a planet that was slowly becoming uninhabitable. And then, the atmosphere itself would begin to change. Without sunlight heating Earth's surface, the atmosphere loses one of the main energy sources driving global weather. The temperature difference between the equator and the poles begins to change. The massive engine that has powered Earth's climate for millions of years starts shutting down. But the atmosphere doesn't simply become peaceful. Instead, it begins searching for a new equilibrium. Winds shift. Storm systems change. Cloud patterns become unpredictable. And across the planet, weather becomes increasingly strange. The familiar climate zones that humans built civilization around would begin disappearing. But eventually, there would be nowhere left to escape. Above ground, temperatures would continue falling. Oceans would become increasingly covered in ice. Agriculture would disappear. And the surface would become a frozen wasteland. Humanity's last hope would move underground. Deep beneath the frozen ground, geothermal energy could provide heat. Nuclear reactors could generate electricity. Artificial lights could allow small farms to grow crops. For a while, isolated communities might survive. But there is a brutal limit. Energy can keep a person warm. It can power a machine. It can illuminate a room. But civilization requires something much larger. A functioning ecosystem. A stable food supply. Millions of farms. Healthy oceans. A breathable and balanced atmosphere. Those systems cannot simply be replaced inside a bunker. You might keep a handful of people alive underground. Maybe thousands. Maybe even more, with enough technology and preparation. But feeding billions without sunlight is another problem entirely. And while humanity struggles to survive on the frozen surface, The black hole at the center of the solar system would remain completely silent. It wouldn't roar. It wouldn't glow. It wouldn't chase us. It would simply wait. And that leads to one of the strangest parts of this entire scenario. The black hole wouldn't behave like the cosmic monster movies taught us to imagine. It wouldn't suddenly suck everything into space. It wouldn't grow larger every second. And it wouldn't consume the planets around it. A black hole with the mass of our Sun would have almost no effect on Earth's orbit beyond the loss of sunlight. Earth would continue circling it at roughly the same distance. Year after year. Century after century. But there is something else happening. Black holes are not completely silent. According to Stephen Hawking's prediction, black holes can emit an extremely faint form of energy known as Hawking radiation. It is a strange consequence of quantum physics. But for a black hole with the mass of the Sun, the radiation would be unbelievably weak. So weak that the black hole would lose mass incredibly slowly. Far longer than the current age of the universe. For Earth, it would effectively be irrelevant. The black hole would remain almost perfectly dark. No sunlight. No warmth. No visible warning. Just a tiny region of space where an entire star used to exist. And this is where the scenario becomes deeply unsettling. Because the black hole wouldn't need to attack Earth. It wouldn't need to destroy the planet. It wouldn't even need to move. The destruction would come from something much simpler. The absence of light. The oceans would freeze. Plants would disappear. Animals would die. Human civilization would collapse. And eventually, the surface of Earth would become almost completely silent. But deep beneath the frozen crust, geothermal heat could still survive. Some microorganisms might continue living. Perhaps small ecosystems could exist around deep underground water systems. Life might not disappear instantly. Instead, it would retreat. Deeper. Darker. Smaller. Until almost nothing remained. And then comes the question that makes this scenario even stranger. Would Earth eventually fall into the black hole? Earth would not spiral into the black hole. It would not suddenly be pulled from its orbit. It would simply keep moving. The planet would continue traveling around the invisible object at the center of the solar system, completing one orbit roughly every year. But there would be no sunrise. No sunset. No seasons. No summer. No spring. Only darkness. Imagine standing on the frozen surface billions of years from now. The continents would be buried beneath ice and snow. The oceans would be sealed under enormous layers of frozen water. The atmosphere would be thin, cold, and radically different from the one we know today. Above you, there would be no bright sun. Only stars. And at the center of that ancient orbit, a black hole. The dead remains of the object that once made Earth alive. But here's the strangest part. From far enough away, an alien civilization studying our solar system might not immediately notice anything unusual. They would observe the planets moving along their familiar orbital paths. Earth would still orbit the same central mass. The gravitational behavior would look almost identical. The mass of the system would still make sense. Nothing would appear obviously wrong. Except for one enormous difference. There would be no light. And that reveals something deeply disturbing about gravity. Gravity doesn't care about life. It doesn't care about trees. It doesn't care about oceans. It doesn't care whether a star is shining or whether it has collapsed into darkness. To gravity, the mass is what matters. The Sun and the black hole would produce essentially the same gravitational pull at Earth's distance. But to life, the difference would be everything. Because life doesn't survive on gravity alone. Life needs energy. And almost every ecosystem on Earth ultimately depends on one source. The Sun. So the most terrifying thing about this scenario isn't that the black hole would destroy Earth. It wouldn't. So when you look up at the sun tomorrow, take a moment to understand what you're actually seeing. Not a guarantee. Not an eternal gift. And not something that exists for us. It is a gigantic sphere of plasma, powered by nuclear fusion, burning nearly 150 million kilometers away. Every second, it releases the energy that drives Earth's climate, feeds our plants, powers our ecosystems, and makes this planet habitable. We barely notice it because it has always been there. Every morning, it rises. Every evening, it sets. And tomorrow, we expect it to do the same. But imagine for just one moment that it didn't. Imagine looking into the sky and seeing only darkness. Imagine the warmth disappearing from your skin. Imagine forests dying, oceans freezing, and humanity retreating beneath the ground. And imagine the black hole remaining exactly where the sun once was. Silent. Invisible. Patient. The universe would continue moving. Earth would continue orbiting. The stars would continue shining. But the world we knew would be gone. And that reveals something profound about our existence. The universe was never built for comfort. It was never designed around humanity. We exist in an incredibly narrow window between extremes. Too much energy, and life is destroyed. Too little, and life freezes into silence. Somewhere between those two extremes, a star burns. And around that star, one small planet happens to be warm enough for oceans, forests, animals, and human beings to exist. That is what makes Earth so remarkable. Not that it is guaranteed. But that it works. Right now. Today. Every time sunlight touches your face, you are experiencing something that seems ordinary only because you've experienced it your entire life. A star is shining. Earth is turning. And life is still here. For now. And if we're lucky, it will stay that way for a few billion years more.